Hello, everybody. This is Monica Paolini from Senza Fili, and today we're talking about the Open RAN ecosystem, the end-to-end. What does Open RAN mean for a wireless network? And I have the pleasure today to talk to Ganesh Shenbagaraman, and he is at Radisys, and he is the head of standards, regulatory affairs, and ecosystems, which is a lot of stuff to work on. So Ganesh, thanks for talking to us today.
Monica, nice talking to you again.
So, okay, let's get started. And maybe you can tell us what is that you're doing at Radisys and what is that Radisys is doing in the Open RAN, within the Open RAN ecosystem.
Very good, thank you. And in my role as head of integrated products, ecosystems, and regulatory affairs, we have been focusing on how do we work with the ecosystem, promote the open standards towards wireless network evolution. And we've been doing this for a while, working with the ecosystem and being a software-centric vendor. We've been supplying technology or software solution towards building disaggregated multi-vendor networks. And primarily our focus is on software. And we work a lot together with the partners in the ecosystem to provide 5G solutions, earlier 4G and 3G. And we see an interesting opportunity for us to expand the space, not just in the public networks and even in the private networks, and many interesting applications in different verticals.
Yes, and I have to say that for Radisys, it just seems like Open RAN is the sort of a natural thing to do because, and in a way, it's nothing new because you've been committed to open standards and working with different interfaces with different partners across. So maybe you can tell us how is the sort of like getting into Open RAN as it changed what you were doing already, or is it just more of the same?
Okay, so I'm going to go back in time almost 20, 30 years. And one of the earliest internal design standards we had, a particular standard, probably I would not give the proprietary name here, but that had already well-defined interface for every protocol, and which was the standard we had to adhere to when we were developing the protocol software right from our 2G or pre-2G days. And so almost everyone who was in that software development and the engineering team already was aware of the need for well-defined interfaces. In fact, we had kinds of documentation about these well-defined interfaces. How do we make it neutral to the agnostic to the underlying operating system and different layers of interaction, and all based on the RFCs and specifications coming from 3GPP and related bodies, right? And this was very natural for us. So we saw the industry evolve towards very focused efforts. First was this FAPI interface, which was from Small Cell Forum, and it was just around 2009-10 timeframe. And we joined this Small Cell Forum in 2007. And we saw the early adoption of the FAPI interface. And from there, we saw multiple efforts in the industry to standardize more interfaces. We saw the effort from TIP in the initial days, the telecom infrastructure project, to define more well-defined APIs. And later, when we saw more efforts from XRAN, when XRAN became ORAN Alliance, we saw a lot more coming in terms of the industry moving, preparing itself to a multi-vendor solution. And having dealt with all these protocols and interfaces all the while, it was a very natural evolution for us. And we naturally became members of all these forums. Not only became members, we provided the early implementations of many of these standards, whether it's ONF's implementation of CORD or the early implementation of the XRAN architecture, which gave these southbound and northbound interfaces for controllers, and all the FAPI implementations and interoperability tests. So we've been part of these various industry events and early efforts, and many trade shows in which we showcase this, taught us and made us work very closely with our partners. And that's how our ecosystem partnership widened over the last one and a half decade, I would say.
Absolutely. Now, since you mentioned the small cell forum before, I forget about asking you this. You've been doing a lot of work on small cells. How do you see small cells and Open RAN going together? Is Open RAN going to be mostly initial, at least initially, it's going to be more small cells or macro cells, or does it? both in the same way?
I think it will happen kind of simultaneously. The solution of small cells where it is more meaningful in terms of the specific coverage, either in indoor or outdoor scenarios, where it makes both the technical and economical sense to build a small cell there. And I think those will go the small cells way, and there are platforms available, and more or less the same software base can be used to build the similar functionalities of CUDU, whether you can package it in one flavor or integrated fashion or spread it across. And even in small cell forum, you see some of the literature where we kind of illustrate the product realization options in the split and non-split fashion. You can do an option 2 split or an option 6 split, or combine everything into all-in-one architecture. So that flexibility is allowed in these standards, and there is a natural harmony that exists between these open RAN approaches and what Small Cell Forum has been advocating. And I think in terms of the cost and performance factors or the capacity, and I think it's the deployment, who is deploying, they're going to make those choices whether small cells or not.
Yes. So and I think that's really interesting. So in terms of other efforts, what do you see are the main efforts here in terms of standardization for Open RAN?
Yeah, I think there is enough standards available right now from Small Cell Forum and ORAN Alliance for anyone to realize these implementations based on the need. The split is more a technical question in my view on what suits the need or the application and use case. But in terms of available standards, there is enough standards available now, and we're going to see more collaboration among these SDOs or the standards development organization, whether it's Small Cell Forum or ORAN Alliance. And we're also going to see more alignment between ORAN Alliance, and we're always using the 3GPP standards and specifications as the base. And there's going to be a natural evolution in which we'll see all of this is harmonized, so that the product companies and the consumers who is consuming these solutions, they have the choice of architecture which is most suited, and standards are just going to enable whatever combination that is needed for that solution. And I believe we have reached a point of stability in the world of standardization where there is enough collaboration, licensing happening already.
Yeah. So do you think 3GPP is going to be getting more involved into the Open RAN interfaces?
I think the influence of this architecture and how it further evolves will be seen in 3GPP as well. That's an indirect or a mild way to put it. But I believe the companies which are participating heavily in the 3GPP standardization, they are the ones who are putting in all their efforts and energies in ORAN Alliance and Small Cell Forum. So I think there's a deep desire, both from operators and the vendors, to make it all align and to make sure that we build on the base from each of these standards and specifications, right? And 3GPP being the base, which is derived from the ITO recommendations. And on top of this, you have this ORAN Alliance flavor and the small cell flavor of the solutions standards for that.
So, as you mentioned, there's the need for standardization means that you need to work with different partners. And it's not just on standardization, it's just to get the product, just to deliver Open RAN to enterprises and operators. How is it that Open RAN is changing, or how do you work with different partners? You're working with everybody from chipset vendors all the way to system integrators. How is that working out?
Yeah. So sometimes it could be so diverse and challenging, and at the same time, once you evolve principles of how you build your pieces to make interoperability more or less seamless. Nothing is seamless in the technical side when you go for the first time interoperability and integration testing. But given that there are lessons learned and best practices in whatever you are building, and it applies to us and to our partners as well. And we see that once you are clear about the alignment or the conformance of your own product with respect to those standards, and if you do enough prep work in terms of exchanging information of what is actually implemented, there is always this complexity of you support 100 different options and your partner also does 100 different options, then you can quite land up in a combination for incompatibility and leading to incompatibility. But typically, if these discussions are well structured, and if your approach is well structured, this is done easier. And that's what I have seen personally myself, getting involved in these ORAN sponsored, tip sponsored Plugfest events, wherein we go into something at a very short notice in a time bound manner, and we achieve the goals in a relatively short time, crossing all the hurdles of logistics, having the right people solve the right problems and showcase that results of that Plugfest. Right? We go through this a few times in a year, and I've seen every time there is enough collaboration in over and above the knowledge and the availability of standards. There should be enough collaboration between the vendors to make it happen in a timely fashion. Otherwise, you can do it forever.
And I guess that it's there is a willingness of everybody to work together because that's what's needed to innovate. So I guess that the companies participating are willing to be truly open in the sense that they see that's an advantage for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, and the fundamental concept underlying all this variety and diversity is that it's going to lead to a best of breed approach. Whoever is doing one particular thing very well, that company will do that better and better and innovate more, and it allows that to happen. And then when combining all these innovations and different things the other vendors are bringing in, they're able to put together something more innovative and compelling for the end user, be it an operator or an enterprise, to tap that.
Absolutely, and with Open RAN, we're also moving in parallel towards cloud native architectures, virtualization, and what that brings in mind is like the hyperscalers too coming in. So not only you have multiple vendors, but also new types of players. Right. How is that playing into the deployment and increased adoption of Open RAN?
Sure. Yeah, it is. Let's talk about it at two levels. One is this hardware-software decoupling, and that means even if you do not virtualize or cloudify it, there is going to be enough hardware-software decoupling because of these open standards. And so the need for specialized hardware or proprietary hardware, that is slowly getting eliminated. And it was always thought RAN is the place where you cannot bring in the commercial off-the-shelf hardware because of the stringent performance requirements and other challenges, right? But slowly that is becoming a reality. To run your RAN software on general purpose hardware, whether it's Intel-based servers or any other combination of ARM or any other processor and some specialized hardware in the form of FPGA, ASICs, GPUs. And now it's becoming more and more standardized, and at least you see more vendors announcing their products in a software form that is able to run on the commercial off-the-shelf servers, right? So that's the first step, and that itself was a bit of a journey for the RAN industry. But I think we've crossed that phase of doubting whether this will work or not, and there are many companies which are making it a reality, and this is good news for the server infrastructure vendors because they are now creating specific SKUs and product lines suited for more RAN deployment, whether it's outdoor or in a data center and so on, right? That is step one. The step two is even more disruptive, where it is cloud native implementations, which means we're going to look at the underlying cloud platform as another layer of infrastructure, and software can scale seamlessly. So here it's disruptive, interesting, and challenging, all of it at once, right? And it's disruptive and challenging both for the vendors and for the operators or enterprises who are going to deploy it, because it shifts the fundamentals of how the network infrastructure has been managed so far. If someone operating the network is always used to seeing some boxes stacked up, LEDs glowing green, red, and yellow, all of that is going to change now. Everything is software. You don't get to see many things in the physical form. And that changes the way it is run, operated, managed, configured, the reports, the dashboards, everything changes. Even the aspect of reliability and resiliency is taking a new meaning, right? Because earlier it was one card going down, another card, backing it up, standby, and all these concepts are being changed now. So we are in the middle of the transition to cloud native RAN infrastructure, and wherein it is seen as okay to centralize some of the functions of RAN, not every function of RAN. Not only centralizing, how much can run on the cloud. Cloud meaning in a cloud infrastructure. It need not be a data center. It could be an edge location running cloud, right? And I think we are in that middle of transition, and it will take some years maybe for the industry to kind of make it mainstream, both from the vendors portfolio and for the end user, whether it's operators or the enterprises, to make it a common practice to deploy in a cloud native fashion, the RAN functions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about what is that Radisys is doing within the ecosystem. So we're talking about more about what is it you do with others. Let's just focus on what is special about what you do. And there is a lot of things that you're doing within the ecosystem. So maybe you can tell us what is that you do and what's special about it.
Very good. Okay. So, and our focus is on the base station software and highly software focused vendor. And that means that we work with a variety of hardware platform vendors, the underlying chipsets and processor companies. All of them are our partners, and we work with them with the view that our software should run seamlessly with less effort to run from one platform to another platform. If some choice is made by who is consuming this product, right? And so we make it easy for our end customer, and we make it easy for our partners as also to benchmark our software on their platform. This is an important validation step for them, who is providing that hardware solution or the chipset solution, to benchmark their hardware or chipset with the software which we build. Not just a localized or a node level benchmarking, it is a complete end-to-end benchmarking. We make sure that the entire solution, all the way up to the core network and the video and voice call data rates, throughput, and performance in terms of how many users can we schedule in a base station simultaneously, with all these benchmarks which are typically expected out of a standard deployable product by an operator or an enterprise. We benchmark to that level to make sure that when we claim integration or interoperability with a particular vendor in ecosystem, we've done the whole 9 yards. And that's what we do. And this means that we work very, very closely with the engineering teams. It's not the marketing teams making an announcement. It is the engineering teams who have to work very closely with each other, replicate what we do, and taking it to neutral labs, proving it in some neutral grounds, whether it's a Plexus venue or a common customer where we operate in the lab environment. So a good portion of our engineering effort is in validating, benchmarking, proving it in neutral third-party locations, and making sure that it is indeed performing the way it is supposed to be. And whatever further roadmap alignment that should exist for both for our evolution in product and our software, with our partners as well, what they need to bring in. So we try to align that level as well to see how we can go to the next level. It could be going from release 15 to release 16, or going from a higher capacity to lower capacity to higher capacity, or pure optimization in terms of how much we utilize on a given platform, whether we can reduce the amount of CPU or energy utilization. That's the kind of collaboration. So that tends to be deep collaboration in many cases. Sometimes it may be a not so deep collaboration based on how much business we are doing together. In many cases, it's going to be a deep multi-year kind of collaboration that happens. And that is to the benefit of our end customer, the common customer we are addressing, the market we are addressing.
And I guess that, as you keep evolving your solution, it's not like you prove interoperability or you make sure everything's working together now and then you're done. It's more of a continuous collaboration that has to happen, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So having been in this space as a technology provider, there are technologies which we have provided way back in 2G times or 3G times, and customers who have been deploying the code which we wrote 25 years ago and so on, right? So we need to maintain that level of performance, not just the interoperability. The software, let's say, when we move from one software release to another software release, the underlying hardware from our partner might not have changed, but we owe it to our customers that it still gives the same or even better performance when we move to the next release. We need to make sure that everything is intact. So that is also inherent in our business, the nature of our business, where we make sure that all of that is continued, maintained intact in terms of feature set, performance, and so on.
Now, in terms of interoperability is clearly a key, opportunity, but also challenge in Open RAN. And there is a question: is everything interoperable? How do you establish interoperability? Can you give us a sense of how do you see the interoperability playing in? Is it something that we're not quite there yet?
Okay.
What's going on in terms
Very
of
good. Okay, if I had to compare 2019 to now, there was the first level of. I'm talking more from an ORAN point of view and experience, and personally, whatever I've seen, right? And in the last 3 years, there has been tremendous progress in the industry, and not only a desire, serious interest, and continuous effort, not just during those events, around the clock during the year, right? And companies have taken this up as a very serious thing because everyone is kind of implicitly acknowledging the fact that the reality of the future networks will be multi-vendor, and a level of interoperability must be maintained. And of course, companies have their own flavor of approach on how far they will go, how much they do, and who do they do this with. So we see that the situation has improved significantly, and standards bodies, whether it's ORAN Alliance and other forums, TIP, for example, they've been constantly focused on ensuring this, because then the whole benefit of going with this kind of architecture is to make sure that everything works almost seamlessly, not exactly plug and play, but with very less effort involved in integrating multi-vendor components. And the efforts, especially both from TIP and the ORAN Alliance, there are multiple labs which have come up across continents, sponsored primarily by the operators, the so-called OTIC labs, which are the labs for even badging or certification. TIP calls it badging, and there is a language of certification also being used now. Some level of badges and certification is being assigned to the vendors who qualify and complete this test, to encourage vendors to come forward and do this more and more often, and to make sure that the industry moves to that state of maturity where a good level of interoperability is achieved. And then, of course, RAN is a more complex domain than other domains if you have to compare Wi-Fi and other technologies, right? And this is far more complex. There is more variety, more flexibility, versatility. So it will still take a concerted effort of the industry, both from operators and OEMs, the vendors, to maintain this, and probably go to a state where you are going to get some guarantees about any of these components you pick, and mix and match for your deployment. I think we are getting there, and it is a much better situation today compared to 3 years ago.
Absolutely. Now there is a sort of a further issue in the sense that, okay, you need to have a solution, you need to have it interoperable, but that's not quite enough because you need to have it integrated in the network.
Exactly.
Right? And this is becoming more and more important when you talk about Open RAN, because basic interoperability, it's just, in a way, it's just a starting point. And then you need to have integration. How do you see that playing out?
This is, again, if you see the announcements of the trials that are going through for Open RAN vendors, and I think there's significant effort involved in this, in qualifying the solution for deployment. And here integration would mean more than the lab level performance, right? We need to take it out to the field, put it in the real field conditions, deployment conditions, right? Where it has to perform equivalent to a traditional solution, right? And by all benchmark, right? Not only the feature set, ease of use, installation, to day-to-day operations and handling of all the alarms and faults, and how do you make sure that the deployment and operations teams get the same level of guarantees and performance from the solution compared to the traditional solution. I think here again, I think more automation has come in, more newer tools and management solutions and integration has happened. And the approach tends to vary between operators to operators. And that's how it has been in the past as well. But a lot of it was traditionally left to one major vendor to manage it to the taste and requirements of a particular deployment in a country by an operator. But now common approaches are available, which can be replicated across different countries, different operators, whether it's the management solutions, the data models, and the metrics. Entities like the RIG platforms, the run and even though it's very early days in my view for the RIG platforms, the network management solutions which are emerging, the platforms which are emerging, and even the infrastructure management, right, from the cloud platforms and so on. They are also being standardized. There are newer vendors who entered the space to solve this problem. So having more standardized approaches, more automation, and more closed loop approaches will help the operators move to a new level, wherein the experience becomes even better than how it used to be. But it is a transition phase right now, because what used to happen in the traditional proprietary way was obviously working very well and reliable, and many people credit the network operations team, not just the wireless infrastructure, the complete infrastructure, including wireless, wireline, everything. The way we all seamlessly worked, carried on with our lives during the pandemic times, right? And so it was the networks were all performing very well. They could scale up to the new demands and stuff. And how do we make sure that this continues to be the story after we bring in aspects like the open RAN technology? And what is the new concepts of cloud-based and self-managed, self-run networks, right? And what we call as the self-operating networks as a concept was there, but more closed-loop fashion. How do you automate the day-to-day operations, configurations, and the fault management? So that's an area of focus right now for many of these operators and vendors. And I would say we are in a transitionary phase right now on that front. Some of the early success stories, and you do see some of these success stories being highlighted in media reports and articles. But for this to happen, as I mentioned, thing on a large scale volume basis, I believe we'll get there soon with the ecosystem of slightly different players who are providing the management solutions, automation solutions, and a lot of software has come in place of hardware, and all the concepts of agile software development and DevOps kind of concept being brought into telco network. That's also a happening story right now. So all of this will lead to a new way of operating, which is going to reduce the manpower you're going to need to operate. A lot of it will run in an automatic fashion, self-managed fashion. So that's where we are moving towards.
Yes, it seems like it's a very interesting, challenging but rich path of innovation moving forward. Ganesh, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you. So thanks for talking to you.
And thank you all for watching our conversation. And you can also read it if you want to. And this is part of a report on the Open RAN ecosystem that you can download and read at senseaffinity.com. Thank you all.